take, for example, our own American presidents, President Donald J. Trump versus Biden. You know, on his first day in office, Joe Biden passed 17 executive orders without a vote of the people or a legal directive from Congress. And Joe Biden's very first act was to require masks on federal property. And according to Joe, this was the most pressing matter in the nation. That was his very first act to institute mask mandates. Number two, Joe Biden rejoined the World Health Organization after President Trump had withdrawn the U.S. from the WHO. Remember how we cheered when Trump cut all ties and funding to the United Nations as well. Well, he was working on that, but also to the WHO. He cut all ties to the WHO. Well, Biden reversed all that on his very first day in office. Number three, he set up a COVID-19 response team. And their stated intent was to coordinate between both federal and state governments on ramping up vaccinations and distributing more face diapers. And I'm not going to read all 17 of his executive orders, for the sake of time, but we can see where he was going on day one. Other executive orders included the freezing of student loan debt, rejoining the Paris Accord, and revoking the permit for the XL pipeline. And I hope everyone remembers how much gas prices spiked immediately after this act. I mean, like on that first week. Biden also nixed the 1776 Commission, whose intended aim was to teach school children a more traditional and even patriotic history and education, an accurate one that looked at the flaws of our history, but one that also, promoted the idea of we should love our country. He also shielded illegal immigrants from being deported and halted the construction of the border wall, and you see where we are with that today. And finally, he strengthened and legally promoted LGBT rights, trans rights, etc. And that was just on day one. Okay, and there's like 17 executive orders on day one. Of course, we all know also about all the disasters that followed his administration, including the botched withdrawal in Afghanistan, the revitalization of the Taliban, as Joe Biden and the warmongering Democrats and globalist elite, big tech and big pharma and the military-industrial complex pushed us towards the brink of World War III and ongoing wars and rumors of wars, which we are now deeply entrenched in their money laundering operations in Ukraine, and now also war between Israel and Palestine, as Americans on the home front face a difficult job and housing market and super high inflation, a loss of freedoms, and general depravity in our culture with all this social push of pride and all this stuff. And so Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's kind of a side tangent, today's sermon, but here's what President Trump accomplished in his first few days in office. Whether you love or you hate Trump, among the first things that President Trump did when he beat crooked Hillary was to roll back Obamacare. He removed the federal penalties for not having health insurance, forcing people to buy something they don't want, and he returned the power back to the states concerning health and medicine. He also cut funding for sanctuary cities and codified his plans to build the Mexico-U.S. border wall. He also announced his pick for the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, and while we were disappointed a little bit at first, at first with the justices, we ended up overturning Roe versus Wade. And so that's real leadership. President Trump, on day 3, we're only on day 3 of President Trump now, signed an executive order which barred taxpayer funding from being, quote, according to NBC News, to fund non-governmental organizations providing counseling or referrals for abortion or advocating for access to abortion services in their country. And because of this, and I remember when this happened, U.S. taxpayer money stopped going to the UN Population Fund. If you guys heard of that, there is a UN Population Fund which collect just the name of it, the UN Population Fund, right? They collect money from progressive nations to pay for abortions worldwide. So our US tax dollars currently under Joe Biden are going to pay and fund abortions globally. Okay, now Trump, he banned this. He barred this on day 3 of his administration. He put a stop to that. He cut funding to the UN Population Fund. And look, this is according to NBC News. You know, I'm not going to some conspiracy site. Concerning infrastructure, something that the Democrats love to talk about but never accomplish, NBC News said this about Trump. It said, in a similar vein, Trump issued an order declaring the administration's intent to streamline and expedite environmental reviews and approvals for all infrastructure projects, particularly those deemed as high priority for the country, like updating the nation's electric grid or critical bridges and highways. So Trump actually was increasing and working on our infrastructure. But, you know, the Democrats and the liberals, they love to talk about infrastructure, and it's something that we need badly. But instead of sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine and now to Israel and funding both sides of the war, instead of funding endless wars, we could have spent all that money on our own actual infrastructure, on our own people. And so when the Democrats pass infrastructure bills, it's not even about infrastructure. That's not what they're really passing. The infrastructure bill that Joe Biden passed has things in it like addressing racial disparities and climate change and new tax regulations on cryptocurrency. That's what they mean when they talk about infrastructure, when the Democrats talk about it. They're not talking about our electrical grid and making sure it's safe so the grid doesn't go down against an EMP attack, God forbid, or something else. You know, no, it's not about building our roads and our bridges or upgrading our electrical grid. It's about social justice is their infrastructure bill. And so when Biden occupied the White House, he canceled Trump's border wall and reinstated funding to the UN Population Fund. He spent his first day undoing all the good that Trump had done. Okay, so under Trump, we had low inflation, low gas prices, a strong economy, the lowest unemployment for minorities, and most importantly, no new wars. Right? That's what we had under Trump. Things were good. Things were strong. People were secure. People had jobs. They were making money. There wasn't, you know, just all this evil and chaos being propagated at every turn. And so what our leaders do in their first days in office will tell you pretty much all you need to know about their agenda and their character. I mean, what a stark contrast between these two leaders. One is a usurper and the other the President of the United States. Proverbs 28:5 says, "Evil men understand not judgment, but they that seek the Lord understand all things." You know, Biden is an evil man. And if I was allowed to say it without being banned on YouTube, he's also an illegitimate president. You know, don't worry, we'll bleep that out. So, you know, hopefully I won't get banned.